Welcome, guys, back to the I Love Wrestling podcast. I'm your host, as always, Justin Woolwine. Today, we are welcomed with Bill Bain. How we doing, man?
Doing well, man. How are you?
Uh, you know, doing great. Absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you for making it work.
Hey, thank you for inviting me on. I look forward to it.
Of course. Before we dive into your career, would you like to shout out your social medias, maybe upcoming events you got coming up?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram under the underscore Bill underscore Bain, Bain. Same on Twitter. Facebook is Bill Bain fan page, I think it's under. But if you just look up Bill Bain, I'm probably the only page on there, I guess.
Okay,
Um, Upcoming events, man, I stay pretty busy. I share most of my events on my social media. It's the best way to
perfect.
find out where I'll be.
Nice. I love it. Nice and easy. Um, seeing as how we are the I Love Wrestling podcast, I try to start at the same area, the same, general idea. With that said, we all have a moment in time where we fell in love with this sport. So when did Bill Bain find professional wrestling, and what about it made him fall in love?
Man, so when I was a kid, I used to watch wrestling with my grandfather. Um, that was back in mid to late 80s. So really the first core memory I have of wrestling is Hulk Hogan body slamming Andre the Giant. And from that time I was just hooked. Like that was it. I wanted to watch all the wrestling I could. Didn't matter if it was the WWF, NWA, whatever I could find on TV, I wanted to watch.
Who was some of your favorites growing up in that era?
I was a different kind of kid, I think, because I wasn't like a big Hulkamaniac or anything. My
Okay,
favorite wrestlers were Jimmy Snuka and Barry Windham. Totally,
okay,
totally random, and I don't know why, but that's who I liked when I was a kid.
I love it because it's funny because my dad grew up in a similar era. He watched Hulkamania and stuff like that, and he always told me obviously he loved Hulk Hogan, like that was one of his favorites. But he also was a big beautiful Bobby Eaton fan.
Oh
So
yeah.
like it just came out of left field because I was like, as a kid, I never understood that until now, like watching his body of work. But like I was like, okay, so you go from Hulk Hogan to somebody like Bobby Eaton. That's interesting. So Jimmy Snuka and Barry Windham, those are both great picks. What about those guys stood out to you?
I think for Jimmy Snuka, it was just such a unique look that he had. Um, and the Superfly splash off the top rope is like a 5-year-old kid. That was so cool to see. And for Barry Windham, I don't know what drew me to being a fan. I had one of his action figures as a kid, so maybe that was just what it was. But yeah, like that those were the guys.
Okay. You hear a lot of times while growing up, especially when you get into your like teenage years, that like typically a fan will distance himself from wrestling. Was that ever you, or did you stick with it all the way through?
So my teenage years was the Attitude Era.
Okay.
So man, wrestling wasn't cool for the longest time when I was in school. And then by the time I was a senior in high school, which was 99, I'm aging myself. The Attitude Era was on fire. The NWO was hot. So no, there was never a time that I stopped watching. Like I just, as I got into high school, people actually came and talked to me about wrestling as opposed to me trying to hunt out people that liked wrestling.
Was you a WCW guy or a WWF guy?
It's funny. So I had a best friend in high school. He would watch Raw and I would watch Nitro. And we would talk to each other on the phone while this was happening. And we could report back and forth on what was happening on the show. So that way, if something crazy was happening on Raw, I could flip it over and vice versa. I was a WCW guy. Um, by that time, I know you're not really supposed to say this now, but I was a huge Chris Benoit fan.
Hmm.
Um, and I enjoyed watching him. I enjoyed watching the Horsemen, Malenko, Eddie Guerrero, the Luchas. Like all that was so cool. The main event guys by that point for me, I wasn't terribly interested in, but
Yeah.
um, that's what kept me drawn to WCW.
Okay. You brought him up, so and he's always an interesting subject because growing up, as a kid, I was a little different too. Like I grew up in the ruthless aggression era, so like obviously I enjoyed John Cena's and Rey Mysterio's and Jeff Hardy's, but like I don't know, something about Benoit always like captivated me because he made it seem real.
Yep.
Um, do you find it? Um, do you find yourself being able to appreciate maybe his body of work, even though the things he did outside of the ring?
It's hard to go back and watch his matches now, knowing what happened.
Okay.
Um, I can sometimes, if I'm watching an event and he happens to be on it, I can go through and watch one of his matches, but I don't sit down and study his work anymore or anything like that. Just it's tough to watch someone. You can appreciate how good they were while also understanding that they were a terrible human being.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, and I like the way you put it. It's probably the best way to put it. Um, you grow up, you're watching wrestling, and a lot of fans stay on, their that side of the barricade. What made you decide to say, "Hey, I'm gonna take the leap of faith and I'm gonna start training to get in the ring"?
So I never thought I would be a wrestler. Growing up, I was a skinny, dorky kid. Like I just it wasn't in the cards for me. I didn't think. And then I had a friend who grew up around me who trained at a local wrestling school, and he went out on the independent scene, and he was working, I think, probably 3 years or so. Um, and he had an opportunity for a show in outside Philadelphia, and he it was about 6 months out, and they had asked him to bring his own opponent. So he was like, I don't know who I would bring. You have always been into wrestling. Do you want to train and do a match? So I was like, yeah, sure. Like I never thought the opportunity would come. So that was it. Like we went. He taught me, the basics of wrestling, what I needed to know. Mostly not in a ring. We were able to get into some rings before shows, so I could, learn how to bump and protect myself that way. Um, but that was it. Like we choreographed a match that I could go through, and that was it. That's how I ended up in my first match, and I figured that was my only match that I would ever have.
Okay. So, what led to you doing more? And, did you like ever really hone in and get the formative training that most people talk about?
So honestly, after the first match, the promoter at the time came back and he's like, "We'd like to have you back for the next show." And I was like, "Oh, that's crazy, but okay, yeah, great." As far as the formative training, so I started in 2002, and I was lucky enough to be able to work 2 or 3 times a week. So a lot of my training was done on the road, in the ring, live reps, and you hear guys talk about that as how a lot of people did it 60s, 70s, 80s, where you learn the basics, you could protect yourself, protect your opponent, and then you learn how to do everything else in the ring. My first year or two of matches were pretty rough to watch, but as I was able to work with guys who were giving in knowledge and wanted to teach me, I was lucky enough to kind of learn on my own through that. And after probably about 150 or 200 matches, I was comfortable enough that I could get in there and have full competitive matches without much restriction.
Okay. Being honest, besides yourself, and then the only other person I've heard that kind of learned on the road has been that I've had on here anyway is Nikita Koloff. So you're in rare air when it comes to this subject, I guess. Would you recommend nowadays to go do that and just learn the basics enough to not hurt yourself or your opponent, and then learn on the road? Or would you recommend maybe going and getting that formative training that we was talking about?
Absolutely not. I would not recommend anyone doing that today. The independents today are filled with a lot of people who never trained and they're trying to teach people.
Okay.
And it's just a good way to get hurt if you do that. I was lucky enough that I mainly worked with guys who were very experienced. So when I first started kind of delve off into a different topic, but to sort of answer your question, when I first started was when Ring of Honor first started, and I started in Philly, where I was around all of those guys, and I was getting to work with some of the most talented people in in the independents, and
Yeah,
I could not be more thankful for that because that's how I learned. Today on the indies, it's very rare you find somebody, one, who is willing to teach, and two, should be teaching anyone. So if you are a new wrestler or you're looking to get into wrestling, find a reputable school. Don't just find a training school that has a ring set up. Look at your trainer, see what credentials they have, if they've been anywhere, done anything, and definitely do that to keep yourself safe as well as the people you're in the ring with.
definitely. While we're on the subject of training, is that something that you have partaken? Have you tried to train other wrestlers, or is that something that you might be interested in doing in the future?
I have done a number of seminars at different promotions where I go in and I teach guys some of the things I've learned over the years from people who are far more talented than me, and I was just lucky enough to sit under their learning tree, whether it was at WWE or just working on independence. So yeah, I love teaching people. At this point in my career, I um, have far fewer years in front of me than behind me. So if I can teach younger generation of people and hopefully they can learn some things from me, I'm all about doing that.
Okay. You spoke about like when you was breaking in, it was kind of that era when Ring of Honor was just now starting getting hot. That era, the mid 2000s indies were absolutely on fire. What was it like for yourself to try to get out there and make a name for yourself amongst those names that are coming through your Ring of Honors or your CZWs or other top independent names like that?
It was tough because for the first year or so, I didn't appreciate really what I was in. I just was there kind of playing along, thinking that, I was in wrestling, so it's okay. I wasn't going to the gym. I wasn't really focusing on improving myself, improving my gear, my body, things like that. So it wasn't until probably 2 or 3 years in where I looked around and I was like, man, I am surrounded by some of the most talented people in the world. I need to step my game up. And at that point, I realized that, once I really buckled down and got serious, I was able to not fit in completely with a lot of those guys, but I looked like I could belong at least a little bit.
Okay. Um, you know, you've been able to wrestle through multiple resurgence of the independent scene. Like the mid 2000s were extremely hot with, like you said, Ring of Honor, things like that, and then the 2010s where that's when we started seeing those guys from Ring of Honor and companies like that really get their footing. And then, I mean, even now, some would argue that the independent scene is as hot as it's ever been. What are some of the biggest differences that you've been able to see, whether it's at shows or in the locker room, things like that, that maybe on how that the independents have evolved over the years?
It's weird because the more things change, the more they stay the same. Like when I was starting and I was in indie locker rooms, it was just guys who, were there and they were just trying to keep their spot, and everyone wanted to have the best match of the night and go out and work hard. And into the 2010s, it was a lot of the same thing. You could see more of the guys who were either indie or wrestling school dropouts or people starting up their own promotions that got pretty popular then. And now on the indies, man, it's just such a grouping of people. Like you have the guys who were coming down from WWE. That's really popular now. As a lot of people got released, you see them on shows, so they're there to pass on knowledge. And a lot of young guys now, because wrestling's hot again. A lot of younger guys are getting started in wrestling. Um, the locker rooms, there a lot of them are the same, except now instead of me hunting out everyone looking for advice, guys are coming to me because I've been around forever, saying, "Hey, can you watch this? What can I do better?" Like that's the big difference for me.
Okay. When you was getting started, what was it like for you trying to go out and maybe seek those former WWE guys or former WCW guys or guys that have been doing this longer? What was that like for you to try and go and maybe pick their brain?
Intimidating.
Okay.
So my first name I worked a show with was Perry Saturn,
Okay.
and who is not terribly approachable, but and being still a bit of a mark at the time. I mean, we're all marks. We're all doing this. So, but it was Perry Saturn. So, man, I wanted to go up and talk to him. He was just like, you know, he didn't want to be bothered, and it got a little discouraging sometimes where you would encounter some of those guys. Um, but when I could find in a former name who was willing to just sit down and just give me any knowledge, any advice was great. I'm trying to think of guys who jumped out in my early years. Crowbar was a guy who was always willing to give advice. I got to work with Reckless Youth early on, and he was great with giving advice. Um, so yeah, I mean, just trying to find people. Eddie Guerrero was another guy who I had the opportunity to work a show with. Who, man, he watched everyone's match, gave everyone feedback, and that's stuff that is invaluable to have a guy on a show who's going to do that.
Definitely. Do you make it like I don't want to say your mission, but do you make it a point now? So if somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, what did you think about my match?" or "What do you think I can improve?" Do you make it like do you try to help them instead of how maybe others may have tried to not do that?
Always, if I can give any kind of advice to guys, I'm happy to do it. I tell everyone the same thing. I don't know everything. If I did, I would have married Stephanie. That's what that's the line I give to everybody. But uh, if I can offer advice, and I learned another phrase I've used over the years, that I learned from working with Dr. Tom. Uh, you know, because I say it doesn't mean it's right. Some people like vanilla ice cream, some people like chocolate ice cream. I'm going to give you my opinion on what I think could have gone better, or maybe you could have done differently. Doesn't make me right. But if a guy comes out and asks for advice, I will absolutely take any time that I can to. If I have an answer, I will find it for him.
Right. Um, Growing up, I'm originally from West Virginia. I've moved
Okay.
out here to the Chicago area now. So like when I was a kid, that's where like I was exposed to the independent scene. And I can tell you as a kid, there was nowhere quite like a West Virginia crowd. They're always a little rowdy, a little different. And that's, now I'm in Chicago and that's what Chicago crowds are known for is they're how different they are. But when I get somebody who's, you know, been able to wrestle in the West Virginia area, I always like to ask, what's your experience been like working inside the West Virginia territories?
I've had someone try to shoot me.
Okay.
I've had someone try to stab me.
Okay.
Um, so West Virginia can be interesting. I've been lucky enough to work everywhere in the state, from Charleston up to Charlestown, and everywhere in between. They are usually fans that don't get entertainment a lot in the areas, because a lot of the West Virginia towns are just really remote, so they're not getting regular entertainment. So for
Yeah.
them, this is a big deal. This is, their weekend of getting to go out and interact, and so that's a lot of fun for me. Like, I enjoy being able to go out and work in front of crowds that are uh, they want to be heard, they want to be a part of the show, they want to have fun. um it's a lot of West Virginia. Like, that's a big part of the state. Where in West Virginia were you?
So I predominantly watched them in the South Charleston or Dunbar area.
Okay.
I grew up in between Charleston and Huntington. Like that's where my mom lived closer to Huntington, my dad lived closer to Charleston. So somewhere in between is where we watched. So, but mainly it was in the South Charleston areas where like we watched IWA East Coast.
Okay.
Madman Pondo
Oh
was
yeah.
the owner. Um, and I just remember the IWA, they always had, it was a lot different style than anything you see on TV because it was
Oh, yeah.
all death matches or extreme hardcore stuff. So like growing up, it was kind of like my taste of ECW because I was just right after the ECW era. So like I got to see guys like Balls Mahoney come through or Sandman or Sabu. And then your guys like Too Tough Tony or Necro Butcher or Madman Pondo. So like I I don't know. My thing, like going to those wrestling shows, is the crowd was always so into it, and like my dad was always one of those guys that was maybe too into it sometimes. But before and after the shows, you'd see a different, like a completely different side of those guys.
Yeah.
Like when they're in the match, they're into it. They're in your face. Sometimes it can get close to where it seems like hands are going to be thrown or maybe something else. And then afterwards, while they're bleeding and everything else, they're talking to you, taking pictures, signing autographs. And I haven't really been able to see things quite like that up in the Chicago area. Like, obviously, there's still the fan interaction before and after the show, but maybe not to that level, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Is it different because you mentioned like being able to wrestle in multiple like different areas of the state. Is it different wrestling in a more, like closer to the cities as opposed to the more rural areas?
The more rural areas are where you're going to usually get the rowdier crowds, in my experience.
Okay.
Um, for me, so one thing that I kind of pride myself on is when I'm a heel, I'm not a cool heel. I want to go out. I want to get booed. So almost anytime I'm in front of a crowd as a heel, I can get the reaction that I'm looking for from people where they're up and yelling and they're screaming. Um, so that's just something I pride myself on. And I found that in the rural areas, man, you're going to get those people who are been drinking all day and they're looking to and they're looking to just cause trouble. And that's, as a heel, it's great. Sometimes it's a little dangerous, but it's all part of the fun of it.
I'm curious. Can you tell us the story or stories about almost getting stabbed or almost getting shot?
So I was in Brewston Mills, West Virginia, which is about 20 miles east of Morgantown.
Okay.
And I was working on a show, and a fan got up in my face, and they were, kind of like lunging at me like they were going to do something, seeing if they could make me flinch, and it didn't work. And finally, they slapped me. So I did what I had to do and beat them up, and I walked back to the locker room because I was on my way to the ring. So I decided to let things cool down for a minute and uh, take a break. Probably 30 seconds later, someone comes in and says, "The guy's looking for you. He has a gun." I said, "Okay." So, I'm like, I don't know where exactly I'm going to go. It's not like there's, a whole lot of hiding spots at this random place. So, um, thankfully, he pulled the gun and some people talked him down. And, we're just like, look, this is part of the show. You can't go hitting wrestlers. You can't go, starting fights with people and then pulling guns. You just can't do that. So, thankfully, cooler heads prevailed. No shots were fired, nothing like that. But that was that was wild. It was definitely different.
It's wild. I haven't ever seen it get that far. I think the closest I ever seen it get physical, like going to a show, was actually at a TNA event during like the Hogan regime. So it was like '09, 2010, somewhere in there, like right when it first started. Me, my dad, some of his friends and his girlfriend at the time, we went to Huntington. at the like Civic Center like building in Huntington. I don't remember what it was called, but beer money was coming out, and my dad's girlfriend was way too drunk, way too intoxicated, and she decided to get up in Bobby Roode and James Storm's face and like nose to nose, and that might have been the closest I ever seen because they were really fired up. She looked like she was about to jump over the rail. Luckily, like cooler heads prevailed. We got to finish the show, but that might have been the like closest I've ever seen to a fan and a wrestler getting into it or having an altercation. So it's
I can
crazy.
give you a good drunk family member story from Southern West Virginia, actually. It was in, do you know where Bluefield, West Virginia is?
Yep, I
Okay.
have some family down there, or
Okay.
used to.
So I was wrestling the Barbarian
Oh,
um, in Bluefield, West Virginia. He was the first name I ever worked with. So I was
okay.
still young. I was probably 21, 22. My dad drove down with me for the show. Show was at a bar. My dad was well served, and I was having my match with the Barbarian. And Barb is beating me up in a working way, but the Barbarian looks like he's killing you. That's just that's
Yeah.
it. So my dad, so Barbarian has me in a nerve hold, and I see these feet walk beside me, and I'm like, it's not what the referee's shoes were. And the Barbarian has me in a nerve hold, and Barb says, "Oh, your dad's in the ring," and I was like, "Oh, good." My dad's going to get killed by the Barbarian. So he approaches Barb, and Barb's just, this is good for business, and doesn't do anything. Finally, the referee ushered my dad out of the ring, and we continued our match like nothing had ever happened. But at that moment, I thought to myself, well, I may go home alone because if 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 the Barbarian wanted to, there wouldn't be a whole lot any of us could do to stop him
No.
from hurting someone.
And it's funny because like you hear so many stories from legends about the barbarian. If he wants to, or even like the barbarian, Haku, those guys, they can do if they get a hold of you. There's not much that's going to stop them because even a crowd of police officers or whatever security, they're not stopping him. So yeah, I mean, it seems like your dad got pretty lucky that night.
He definitely did. And Barb is him and Haku are the same. I met Haku last year at a show for the first time. So soft spoken, such a nice guy. But the story has always been they're always nice, they're always soft spoken. But if you cross that line, they're not nice and soft spoken anymore. So as long as you can keep them calm, they're great guys.
Yeah, it's got to be cool because, like, I'd assume you grow up watching the guys like Barbarian and Haku wrestle throughout, WWF, WCW, things like that. And then to have a moment that's sentimental to where it's not only yourself getting to be in the ring with Barbarian, but to have your dad kind of get involved, things like that. It's got to be one of those things that's invaluable. Like, you'll never forget it.
You know, for the longest time, I struggled with taking a step back and being in the moment of what's going on. I was always on to the next thing, on to the next thing. And then as I've gotten older, I've started to look back and be like, man, it was cool. Like, I don't ever blow stuff I've done out of proportion because really we're all just characters on a wrestling show. But it's still cool to look back and be like, man, I was in the ring with the Undertaker. Man, yeah, I did this, I did that. Like, so yeah, it just being able to take a step back, look at that, and realize that's really cool. Like just growing up and being in a ring with these people you watched on TV that I never thought would happen.
Yeah. I got one more West Virginia related question, then we'll move on.
Sure.
But you are a multiple time CPW West Virginia champion. What was that like being able to hold that championship so many times throughout the great state of West Virginia?
I was ashamed to have to represent the people of West Virginia with that title.
Okay.
Um, no, it's cool. So CPW is run by a good friend of mine, Shane Shadows, and he would run monthly shows. He would go between Kaiser, Moorfield, and Romney, West Virginia. They're kind of in the middle of the state.
Yeah.
Um, And now he mostly runs some fairs around there, and then he runs a couple campgrounds, which do crazy amounts of fans and just drunk people who are just there to have a good time. So getting that, hold a title there for those um, in front of those crazy people, and now I'm a good guy there. So, they cheer me on instead of wanting to kill me. So it's fun. It's a good time.
Tides have definitely turned.
Oh yeah, no one's trying to
Um,
shoot me, at least there.
that that's better. It's always a good day whenever you go to work and you're not threatened with violence, gun violence, I should say, because
Yeah,
obviously being a wrestler, your
yeah.
violence is
I can't
necessary,
avoid all violence.
but permanent bodily harm maybe.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, something I found really cool about your career is in 2006, kind of early throughout your career, the UWF, whom you worked for, and TNA would do some back-to-back joint shows. You got to tag with the likes of Shannon Moore and Monty Brown against Rikishi and Ron Killings. What was it like working with TNA and some of the best that TNA had to offer at the time?
So my TNA experience was interesting because as a young guy, I was in a situation way over my head. I didn't belong. I didn't have enough experience to be there. In the moment, I was. I'm trying to think of the word. In the moment, I was hurt by how I was treated, but now that I look back on it as a guy who's been around for a while, I can see, okay, this was done for a reason, and it helped me. So I literally got booked for TNA. I sent an email to the TNA office and said, "Hey, I saw you guys are having these events in Virginia. Anything I can do to help out?" And Dave Hebner replied, and he was like, "Yeah, do you want to wrestle?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'd love to wrestle." So he was like, "Okay, you're booked for these two dates. See you there." So I didn't know what was going on, didn't know who I was wrestling, had no idea. So I got there, and the first show was in Norfolk, and that was when I teamed with Shannon Moore against Killings and Kishi.
Rikishi.
And I walked up to the guys because I'm super green, super nervous. So I walk up to Rikishi and I'm like, "Hey, sir, we're working together tonight. What would you What would you like to do?" And he looked at me and he goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "What would you like to do in the ring?" And he goes, "I don't I don't talk about that. You just do it." And I was like, "What?" This was a foreign concept to me. I'd probably had 50, 60 matches. So my first experience of trying to go out and call a match in the ring is with these three guys and the person who's not like the other ones. So it's me and three TV stars, and I was so discouraged by how the match went because I didn't do anything wrong. I just didn't really know what I was doing. Little did I realize I'm pulling the curtain back too far. Um, they walked me through everything. Like they didn't need to tell me everything I was going to do beforehand. They kind of held my hand, walked me through. Then after the match, we had Hermie Sadler, who was a NASCAR driver. He ran in and did something with Shannon Moore where we beat up Hermie Sadler, and then Jeff Hardy came in and beat me up. Now, I had no idea Jeff Hardy was even running in on the match. So that was just one of those things where I was standing there. We heard music. I looked at Shannon Moore and I was like, "What's happening?" And he was like, "Just sell." Okay, great. So Jeff Hardy comes in. I throw a punch. He blocks it, punches me, throws me out of the ring. Great. So now I can say I've worked with Jeff Hardy. um, so the second day at TNA, um, I'm sure word got around that I was not terribly experienced. So Jeff Jarrett came up to me and he's like, "I have this idea that I think would be funny. What if you do the Iron Claw, but instead of just doing the claw, you wind up and throw like you're throwing a pitch, but you do the claw?" So I'm like, all right, sure, whatever, I'll do. I'm not going to argue with these guys. So I do it. And it was all just so they could, have a laugh at my expense, which is fine, whatever, I mean, I deserved it. Looking back, uh, I understand why all this happened. In the moment, I was so down on myself for how I performed and how things went. Um, but afterwards, Rikishi sat down with me for a good hour, and he was like, "Look, man, you're green. There's nothing wrong with that. We all were." And he gave me just tons of advice I still use to this day of here's how you can do this better. Here's what you could do here. Here's how you sell for this. Here's and just hearing all those things from a guy like Kishi, I I appreciate it a ton.
Not too long after that, you get to do some work with WWE for WWE CW. Um, how did doing work with them come about, and maybe what was it like being in the ring with somebody like Vladimir Kozlov?
So right around the same time as the TNA stuff, my uncle was in the National Guard. And Mick Foley used to come to Walter Reed Army Hospital monthly and visit with the wounded soldiers. He didn't want anyone to know because he didn't want any sort of publicity for it. He just wanted to go visit the soldiers once a month. So my uncle called me and he's like, "Hey, do you want to meet Mick Foley?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, great." So I go down and, I meet Mick and I take him a tape of, just some matches because again, aging myself, but had to have a give a VHS tape to somebody to give to the WWE office. So I just never thought anything more about it. I was like, all right, I gave him that tape. Maybe someone will call me, maybe they won't. And one random Friday, I got a call from a block number. So I answered the phone, and the person on the other end of the phone was like, "Hey, is this Bill?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Oh, hi, this is Amanda from WWE." And I think it's a prank call because I'm like, there's no chance a random woman is calling me from WWE to say, "Hey, we want to book you." So I was like, "Oh yeah, sure, whatever, okay." She was like, "Oh yeah, I'll send you all over all the information." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, great." Like I just kind of blew her off because I thought it was a joke. Um, Turned out I got an email from WWE that said, "Hey, we'd like to have you for Raw and SmackDown." They were in DC and Baltimore in it was July of 2009, my first time working for them. Um, Honestly, I didn't really get a whole lot of time to think about it. It was a Friday, and I was booked that Monday, so
Okay.
I drove down and was at the building plenty early. And at Raw, they didn't have anything planned for me. I was just there to kind of hang out, and I got in the ring and worked out a little bit with Ricky Steamboat, which again, as a kid growing up watching the NWA, I was like, I can't believe this is happening. And then I was just sitting backstage drinking coffee. Uh, and a producer came up and they were like, "Hey, Shaq's going to walk by. Can you act like, holy shit, you just saw Shaq?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I can do that." I mean, in reality, they probably wouldn't have had to tell me if I just saw Shaq walk by. I probably would have been like, "Whoa, that's Shaq." So they, film that, get it on TV. Next thing I know, people are calling me and they're like, "Hey, you're on Sports Center," and I was like, "This is crazy." So next day, I go to WWE SmackDown. They have us all. So they used to have everyone get all the extras go just stand around the ring, and if they needed us to, practice a move or do something, they would just call us in the ring. So I don't know if it was because I was the new guy or I was what the thing was, but Arn Anderson asked me to get in the ring. Other than Benoit, Arn Anderson was my I just everything Arn Anderson did, I studied. He asked me to get in the ring, and he was like, "Hey, lock up with me." So I lock up with him. We run through a couple little spots, and he's like, "All right, I need you to work out with Big Show real quick." And I was like, "Okay, great, yeah, sure." So Big Show's practicing some moves on me. He's doing some stuff, and after he's done, I get up, and Arn's like, "I bet you wish you could really get some offense or something here, right?" And I was like, "No, man, there's no place I'd rather be right now than right here because this is my dream. I never thought I'd be." booked at WWE, much less in the ring. And he was like, "Oh, is that right?" I said, "Yeah." About 30 seconds later, Fit Finley comes over and he was like, "Hey, you want to have a match tonight?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. Of course I want to have a match." He's like, "All right, well, go find Jim Ross. He's going to give you all the details." So I'm like, "Okay, great." So I stood outside of talent relations for, it felt like an eternity. I don't know how long it really was. And finally, they're like, "Hey, you're working with Vladimir Kozlov tonight." Great. So Vladimir and I get in the ring. He doesn't speak a lot of English, or at least he didn't at the time. So we kind of walked through a match. Fit was our agent, and Fit was like, "Okay, um, you're kind of big, so I don't want you to get completely squashed. Can you, throw a punch or something?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." He's like, "So when you throw that punch, throw it as hard as you can and punch him because he's not going to sell it." So I thought they were messing with me because I thought they just wanted to see me punch this guy incredibly hard in the face. But it turned out no. Uh, I've been wrestling, that was 16 years ago, and I've still never been hit as hard in my life as I was by Kozlov. Um, he he is uh, a very strong guy and hits really hard. Um, but just being able to stand, in front of that crowd, hearing my name announced like by Tony Chimmel, it just it was surreal. Like I just sometimes I look back and I still can't believe that happened because it's just for a guy who was only supposed to have one match and then never have another match. And a couple years later, I'm working on TV for WWE. It was crazy.
Later on, you'd end up getting to do a segment with the Undertaker. Is that something you ever thought would happen? Like, did you get to maybe pick the brain of the Undertaker at all, either before or after any of that?
Unfortunately, no. Taker was there, so it was a spot with being a druid, and the idea of it was CM Punk was attacking him. So CM Punk was one of the druids. I was one of the druids, and there were some others. I don't know how I got picked. I don't know how I got lucky enough to make that happen. But Taker comes up to me before we go out, and he was like, "Hey, I'm going to pull your hood off." Um, I was like, "Okay, well, what do you want me to do? Like, how do you want me to do it?" And the only advice he gave to me was, "This is your moment. You sell for me however you think you should sell for me." He's like, "Then I need you to position me so my back is to Punk." Okay, so again, now I'm standing here thinking I'm being told by the Undertaker that I need to put him in position to do stuff. Like this is just again surreal. In the moment, I didn't appreciate it because I was like, this is just another day. It's what I'm supposed to do. But now I look back on it, I'm like, no, very few other independent wrestlers have ever had these opportunities. So I've learned to appreciate it a lot more. Um, Afterwards, Taker. So Paul Heyman was dressed as Paul Bearer and dumped the urn on the Undertaker. So Taker
Mhm.
wanted to go shower, so he didn't really stick around. He just said thank you, and that was it. Um, and that was actually the only time I've ever really been around Taker um, at WWE.
Okay. Um, Another like real memorable moment that you was a part of, you was a conquistador, took on the Authors of Pain. Tell us a little bit about that.
So that was one of those things where a lot of people have the misconception at WWE where I go and I'm just an extra and I know what I'm doing. Like I have any idea what's going to happen, but
Hmm.
we don't know at all. I got
Okay.
to the building and John Cohn was the head referee at the time. And as soon as I walk through the door, he stops me and he's like, "Come with me. I need to talk to you." So my first thought is, oh no, what have I done? Like I'm in trouble. Um, so Cohn pulls me into a room and he was like, "Look, um, you're going to work tonight as the conquistador. Um, you are the person who's the closest in size to Kurt Angle, and we think you can do it. So, what we need you to do is go to the seamstress immediately, get measured for the conquistador outfit, and then go to the ring and find Kurt Angle. So I'm like, all right. So all of this is happening, and it's all just such a whirlwind at this point because I'm getting told to do, go to the seamstress. Then they're like, go to the ring with Kurt Angle, but all the information is very vague. So I don't know what's happening. So I get to the ring and Kurt's in the ring. He's like, get in here. So I'm like, all right. And then I spent the next 2 hours getting blown up to death by Kurt Angle. Just the idea was to teach me Kurt's mannerisms, teach me how Kurt does the ankle lock. Kurt was basically just giving me a wrestling lesson in one, in how to be him, but two, just you're learning other things as you go with Kurt. So that was crazy. And then after we finished that, I had to go back to the seamstress. I got fitted for that gear. Then they said, all right, get in your gear, go to the ring. So I'm like, okay. So I go to the conquistador outfit, get in the ring. Author's a painter there. So Devon Dudley was the agent for that. We go through the match, we walk through it, and Devon's like, all right, come with me. So I'm like, okay. So I follow Devon. Next thing I know, we're walking into Vince's office. And I'm like, all right, should I wait outside? He was like, no, absolutely not. You come in here. And I was like, all right. So I walk into Vince's office, and Vince stands up and, hey, how you doing? So um, Devon's like, all right, I'll be back. So now I'm sitting in a room alone with Vince McMahon, dressed in a giant gold suit. So it's again one of those things where I never thought that would happen. But Vince watched the match back that was recorded, and he was saying, "Hey, when you do this here, what if instead of turning your back, you face them?" And I'm now getting lessons in ring positioning and you know what to do and not do in the ring from Vince McMahon. Again, another one of those things where it was just like I never thought this moment would come, but here we are. Um, when it came time for the match, it was over in such a blur. It was a minute or so.
Yeah.
Um, we we were given the idea to end the match about 30 seconds early so they could unmask me. And in their mind, it gave me a chance to have my face on camera, but it also gave a chance to show that I wasn't Kurt Angle.
Yes.
Great. So we did that, and it it worked out. Everyone was very happy with it.
You've been able to do extra work for WWE multiple times throughout the year. Uh, has the process ever changed over the years, or is it always looked the same?
The process has definitely changed. It used to be so. I've been lucky enough for the last 15 years, from '09 to last year. I've done extra work 150, 200 times. Like there right after COVID, I was there almost every week. Just lucky to have that opportunity. To kind of sidetrack from that, like I never had the idea that I would ever get signed. I didn't think that just much like having my first match or anything else. I didn't think that was going to happen. So I was just thrilled to be an extra. I had a good regular job, so I was just happy to do that. Um, so over the years, it's gone from getting a call, hey, can you be here this day? Okay. And then it went to email. And then depending who was booking the extras, sometimes it would be a text, sometimes they would call. Um, when you get to the building, you used to have matches before the doors open so the agents could see you. Um, they don't do that anymore since both shows are live now. Like there's a lot of things that have changed over the years.
You've mentioned, you've done extra work for WWE for years now. You've obviously had a very long career. What's been maybe your favorite match or moment throughout your career if you had to pick one?
Man. So last year I was in. So one of the main promotions I wrestle for is Three Legacies Wrestling.
Hmm.
That's in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, run by Ricardo Rodriguez.
Cool.
Um, Highly recommend checking them out if you haven't heard of them. Um, so I won the Red Rose Rumble, which is their, so it's a battle royal, but it's kind of like their version of the Money in the Bank, where you get a trophy and you can cash in that trophy at any time. So the last show of the year last year, Zoe Cannon, who is a female, won the title, and she's probably their most popular wrestler, won the title from one of the heels. Um, the idea would be that I would stay in my car until she's won the title, at which point I come in dressed in all black, run out to the ring. No one knows I'm there. Fans don't see me. The wrestlers don't see me. I cash in on her, beat her. Like, to me, that was so great because one, I got to win a championship for a promotion that is uh, really a rising promotion. I got to do something as a heel that is fits my character exactly, of being an underhanded person, cashing in on a woman. The crowd hated it. Everyone, including the boys, were surprised. So to me, that was really cool to do all of that and it uh, just come off so well.
Do you have any dream matches left? Is there anybody that's out there that before you hang up the boots that you would like to tie it up with?
Man, there's tons of people I'd love to have matches with. Right now, um, I've I don't keep a list of guys I want to wrestle just because it's so hard to get those matches. But honestly, I look forward to working with anyone and everyone that I can get in there with, and either I can teach them, they can challenge me, or both. And even though I've been doing this forever and I've learned from great people, I'm still learning every day. So I always look forward to the opportunity getting in the ring and learning from guys and um, so anyone that I can learn from or I can teach, I'm all about it.
What's the biggest piece of advice that you've been given and you've kept with you throughout the duration of your career?
The moves don't matter. I know that that is going to sound so boring to a lot of people, but I have learned that less is more. And for
Hmm.
me personally, it sets me apart on a lot of shows because my matches aren't cool moves and high flying stuff. That's just not what I do. I leave that for the young guys. Um, and that sets me apart. That makes me different. I don't do anything. Once in a while, I'll do something that is unexpected that people wouldn't think they'd see from me, gets a huge reaction. But if I do that all the time, then it's not as exciting, not as interesting. So that's my biggest piece of advice I give to guys. And I know a lot of guys will roll their eyes and be like, "Oh no, that's the old way of thinking," and that's okay if you think that. That's just what works for me.
Last question, and I'll let you go.
Yeah.
We are halfway through the year of 2025. What are some of your goals that you have left for this calendar year?
So I lost the Three Legacies Championship a couple weeks ago to Savio Vega.
Okay.
I'd like to win that back, whether it's at Three Legacies or I have to go to Puerto Rico. That's it's definitely on my list of things to do.
Gotcha.
I'm going to Germany in November for the first time traveling internationally. Really looking forward to the opportunity to do that. Um, I'm hoping I get to go to Puerto Rico to work down there for Savio's promotion. Um, and any new states that I can wrestle in, I'm always looking to get to new areas, and never been out to Illinois. I've never wrestled out in the Chicago area. So
Okay.
hey, if you know of anybody, please let me know. I'm always always willing to travel, always looking for opportunities. And the rest of 2025, right now, I have kind of taken a stop on doing WWE bookings for the moment, just because after last year, I did WrestleMania and I did Madison Square Garden, and those were the two last things to really check off on my bucket list for WWE stuff. So right now I'm just focused on traveling, whether it's internationally, new states, new promotions, any opportunity I can get. I'm still out here, still tying up the boots and always looking for new opportunities.
Definitely, definitely. Bill, I just want to say thank you, first and foremost. Thank you for coming on here. Thanks for sharing your story. I feel like there's still a lot of meat on the bone. We can definitely do a part two if that'd be something you'd be interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. I one day I plan to write a book, which I know sounds ridiculous for indie wrestlers, but I've just seen and been able to do so many cool things that I want to share my story of a guy who was told he shouldn't, he can't, he won't, and I made it happen.
Right? You know, I would love to have you on here anytime to continue telling these great stories. And I'm looking forward to when that book comes out, being one of the many readers that happens to
Appreciate
come
it.
across it. Um, Bill, before we go, I know we did at the beginning of the program. You want to just shout out your social medias one last time just to make sure they caught it, just in case for some reason they
Yeah,
wasn't
absolutely.
paying attention.
Twitter and Instagram, you can find me at the_Bill_Bain. On Facebook, if you just look up Bill Bain, Bain. Um, I am, if you go to the pages, I think my page is like 11 or 12,000 likes, so should hopefully be up at the top there. And yeah, I think that's all social media I have. But if any promoters, promotions, fans, anyone wants to reach out, send me messages on social media. I try to be fairly responsive, so definitely hit me up, and I'm happy to answer any questions or help out any guys if there's a wrestler watching this who I can offer any advice to. All
Sounds good. Bill, I will leave this at talk to you next time.
right, man, I appreciate it. Thank you.